Welcome to the Property Buyer Podcast, where we explore the world of residential and commercial real estate to help you make better decisions about buying, selling, or investing in all types of property. Join me, Rich Harvey, CEO of propertybuyer.com.au and multi-award-winning buyer's advocate. Our podcast features expert interviews, market trends and insights, and practical tips for navigating the complex world of Australian real estate. Whether you're a home buyer, a seasoned property investor, commercial buyer, developer, or simply curious about the property market, our podcast is for you. Join us as we share our knowledge, strategies, and experience and help you achieve your property goals. Well, welcome again to another edition of the Property Buyer Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Adrian Bo, one of Australia's top real estate trainers. With more than 3 decades in the industry, Adrian has built an extraordinary reputation as a leading auctioneer, sales coach, and business strategist. He's conducted thousands of auctions, overseen billions in residential sales, and mentored countless agents through his renowned Adrian Bo training auctions business. Armed with an MBA and a career that spanned senior leadership roles, Adrian combines academic insight with real-time street experience. He's widely regarded for his ability to break down the psychology of negotiation, communicate with authenticity, and inspire both agents and clients to achieve better outcomes. In today's episode, we'll deep dive into the art of negotiation, explore how agents really think, and uncover strategies that buyers can use to gain the upper hand in a deal. Adrian Bo, welcome to the podcast.
Rich, my brother, how are you? Long time no speak. Always had a great admiration for you, and I know we've done a few deals together in the past, and I think we also might have done a podcast together at some stage. But great to be with you. Yeah,
great to have you on board, mate. Looking forward to getting into the juicy topic of negotiating. But before we dive in, we have a little tradition where I'm going to throw you a thought of the week and get your philosophical thought about this. And the thought of the week, or thought of the day, is from Lao Tzu, who says, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." What do you take from that quote?
Yeah, well, what I take from it is you got to let go to grow, and you know to be able to scale, you have to be empowered by surrounding yourself with people that are specialists and experts in their lane. You know, there's not one person who's achieved any degree of success, in my opinion, inside or outside of our industry, who hasn't identified what their highest and best use is, and then plug the gaps by using either a resource, a personality, or a job, or some sort of process or efficiency to fill in the gaps. So yeah, that's my translation piece, I think, for business and real estate in general.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, for me, what I get out of it is that sometimes we've got to move beyond where we are. I mean, the person that says, "I've made it," watch out. They're probably going to trip over their front toe, right? But it's letting go of prejudice. It's letting go of a negative mindset. It could be letting go of anything in the past that holds you back. And I think a lot of us hold on to negative thinking. You know, I've got to let go of, I don't think I'm good enough. I don't think I should have that home. I don't think I should have that job. I don't think I could have that partner, or whatever it is. And stepping into what might be, it's the realm of possibility. That's what I love about that quote. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of that self-talk. There's a lot of that voice in our head, which everyone has. Everyone has it. It's, you're not good enough. You're not young enough. You're not old enough. It's never going away. It's just a matter of being able to manage it. And a lot of my work is dealing with those disempowering beliefs or limiting beliefs, or even mooring lines, if you like, which I'm constantly having people let go of them, really.
That's great. Well, let's get into talking about mindset. It's a good segue, actually. We're going to talk a bit about the mindset and emotional intelligence, particularly around negotiating. But before we do that, can you just tell us, Adrian, what was your first job in real estate and how did you get into the industry? What attracted you to the game?
1989. I left school in 88, so 89. I mean, really the only available job back then, as you know, Rich. I mean, you're you're really probably the OG of buyer's agent. I mean, it's a burgeoning industry now of our ecosystem in real estate buyer's agency.
25 years for me this year.
Yeah. I would say, I wouldn't even say one of the OGs. I would say, I can't really think of anyone else, actually, apart from you. There was a couple.
Yeah, maybe
the only people that, Brenda Jack, you, and Byron Rose, they're the three people that sort of come to mind.
But what got you into real estate?
Mate, I was always fascinated with the financial markets and did work experience in the financial markets and had a job waiting for me as soon as I failed my HSC. Not by choice. I actually love academia, but unfortunately in those days, if you missed your exams, and I did, unfortunately, because it was my first experience with chronic fatigue syndrome, due to glandular fever happened. So it's not like they give you another chance, like now it's amortized over 2 years. Anyway, so I ended up doing MBA much later in life. But so my dreams were shattered there to do economics. So I just was working as a runner for Renault Rivkin in the city, and then the Black Friday occurred where, everyone lost their jobs, and I didn't, but it was inevitable. And I went past my brother's office on the way home. He was in sales. That's in Maroubra, and his boss said to me, "How much are you earning?" I said, $150 a week. He goes, "How would you like to earn $300 a week?" I said, "Yeah, sounds good." And then, mate, in those days, as you know, the only job for a 17-year-old was a letting clerk, so that's how it started. And there was no verticals of new business, leasing, property management, etc. It was just assistant property manager and property manager. So, it all started from there.
Fascinating start. Well, let's fast forward to, what are we now, September 2025. How do you describe the state of the real estate market, particularly in the eastern suburbs, where I guess you do most of your work? What do you what kind of words do you describe the current state of the market now in Sydney?
I think the current state of the market is exactly where it should be, in the sense that it's a normal market. I mean, I've got a saying that abnormal markets, or booms, if you like, only happen every 7 years, and they last for about 7 months. And that's after 35 years in the industry. So I'm always coaching my agents that, 85-90% of your career is going to be in a normal market. So you better learn how to be a practitioner in a normal market. And the way to do that is over-communicate and offer great service and just be a good human, The rest is all very, very teachable. But in terms of, the objective market conditions, I mean, we've got lowering interest rate environment for the first time in 4.5 years. We've got 20% down on inventory over the last 5 years as an aggregate. That's nationally throughout Australia. And you've got some pretty enticing first home subsidies and incentives that have been brought forward, kicking off in a few days, 1st of October. So I think we're in for almost a perfect storm, not quite COVID-like, but almost COVID-like, where I think around the end of this year, you're going to see probably about a 10% jump in overall pricing, in my opinion.
It's what you mentioned, something that's very close to my heart, is the lack of listings. I mean, I talk with Tim Lawrence quite a bit. He was on the podcast just a couple of weeks ago, and I often ask him about why the listing volumes keep trending low. Like, we're well below the 5-year average. It's somewhere
20%. That's huge.
Yeah, in the east, in some suburbs it's 10, other suburbs 15, others 20. But that's again, it's the lack of supply. It makes it very difficult for buyers to navigate the market. But as you say, potentially a perfect storm where you've got more, even though affordability is stretched, every time you get a rate cut, more people can get into the market, you know, and then you pour fuel on the fire with this 5% deposit scheme that the government's bringing in. I think that's crazy, but, you know, it's just going to add fuel to the fire. Yeah.
And it's not as if they're building enough new homes to cater for it, not to mention 1,500 migrants a day entering in the country with no additional infrastructure or housing. So,
that's right.
I mean, you do the math, you know, people have got to live somewhere. So that's not stacking up. I mean, we used to only have 80,000 people a year migrating to Australia. Now we've got 400,000 a year. I mean, I'm not racist or suggesting that we shouldn't have migration, but it needs to be an intelligent strategy.
Migration's great for the economy because it brings in more skilled workers. We suffer as an economy if we don't have migration. But you're absolutely right, the infrastructure and the housing to support that. But Adrian, let's turn our attention now, if we can, to negotiations. I've got a question for you about what's the role of emotional intelligence in real estate? How do you think an agent's EQ is going to impact the outcome of negotiations?
I think it's everything. To be honest, Rich, I genuinely, you know, when I say everything, I mean, I'm being a bit, sort of using a bit of hyperbole there, but I would say 80% emotional intelligence, meaning that let's use auction as a process, for example, whether it ends up being an event on the day or ends up selling prior. You know, when an agent is initially, you know, securing the listing, you know, they've obviously got an optimistic, you know, client. And then once it hits the market, you've got buyers who, you know, don't necessarily want to pay the opportunistic price. They're not bargain hunters per se, but they want value. They want to see value. Yeah. So, you know, I think as an agent to be the conduit and the facilitator of that needs an incredible amount of EQ, to actually have foresight, almost like a chess game, to be 3 moves in front. And I'm not suggesting in a nefarious way, but really, you know, managing expectations in terms of, okay, you know, Mr. Seller, this is what you can expect this week. And these are the 3 possible scenarios. We might be well above what we're expecting. We might be exactly where we're expecting. We might be below, but that's okay. Let's have a conversation next week, and we'll use the levers at our disposal that we can control, which is how we market it, how we present it, how we price it. Because let me tell you, there's a lot we can't control, which is geopolitical issues, which is interest rates, which is inflation, the economy, etc. And then with buyers, the same thing. It's like, well, you know, you want to offer a lot less, but why? What's the opportunity cost of that? Is it an objective financial restraint, or is it your opinion of value? And if it's just the opinion of value, let me have a conversation with you about what else is sold and let me help you justify it. If it's an objective financial limit, that's fine. Let me find you something else, you know. So EQ, I think, is absolutely, you know, paramount for an agent, and a lot lack it, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, exactly. They've got to read the room. So a question for you about when buyers are negotiating, what emotions tend to derail them the most, and how can they keep cool under pressure, do you think?
I think the main emotions for buyers that tends to derail them is you know, overthinking the process. You know, I think every buyer, if they're a little bit naive or it's their first property or perhaps second property, but for some reason believe that they need to buy in a market that's at the bottom within an inch of its life. Do you know what I mean?
You're trying to get the timing right. I have this conversation every day.
That's right.
When's the best time to buy? Rich, 10 years ago, right? You know, and they're trying to perfect the dive. They're trying to perfect the market like an Olympic diver without getting a splash. It's not going to happen, you know. You just got to buy when you're ready.
Right. That's right. Yeah. That's right. And you'd be telling this to your clients all the time. I call it circumstance-based, not market-based. Yeah. You know, like if you've just got a pre-approval and your house is too small because you've got a growing family, mate, don't worry about the market. Just you need to buy something bigger, you know. Yeah.
I reckon
circumstances.
But I reckon I'd like to ask you about 2 things: FOMO and FOPTO. Yeah. Okay, fear of missing out, fear of paying too much. Yeah. Okay. Tell me about those kind of emotions. How can buyers get around that?
Oh, look, I think fear of missing out. They need to be a little bit philosophical and objective and commercial about it, even though that's difficult, especially if it's not an investment, it's a family home.
Yeah.
That can be easier said than done. But there's a balance, Rich, because, if you're competing at an auction, well, it's impossible to argue that does not represent market value, number one.
Yeah.
And if you genuinely feel that this is the right property and you genuinely feel that you've missed out on 3 or 4 others and you genuinely feel the opportunity cost of looking for another 6 months is going to take you away from family, your work and whatever, well, does it matter if you pay another, $20, $30, $40, $50, $60, $70,000? Probably not. If you're going to be there for 7 to 12 years, which seems to be sort of the average, and fear of sort of paying too much. I think that's probably if you're probably more of a commercial sort of minded buyer and you're looking at yields and possibly an investment property, then I think that can make sense. But yeah, that'd be my sort of initial sort of two thoughts on those points.
Okay. I've got a question around sort of cues or, subtle things. Like from your experience, what are the subtle cues or signals that reveal when someone's about to fold in a negotiation, even if they're saying they're not going to fold? What are those little things that you see in their behaviour or perhaps physiology that means, like, I'm thinking as I'm asking the question about Inspector Clouseau from the Pink Panther, when he's twitching off.
Ah, yes.
But tell me about your experience. Or
Columbo is like, just one more thing. So when you say fold, as in like just surrender and agree. So I think the agent plays a huge role in that, to be honest. I have bought so many properties in my life, and I don't think not one of them I've suffered buyer's remorse. I've suffered buyer's remorse from all of them, but it only lasts a day or two, and it's like, that's fine. Like I've bought it. Let's move forward. So you're always going to second guess yourself. But I think let's look at buyer and seller. So if it's a seller and the agent, all they need to say, it's not revolutionary. All they need to say is, Rich, you know what? I know this is not exactly the price you want. However, we've been on the market for 6 weeks. We've had 7,000 web views. We've had 60 groups through. We've had 4 contracts issued, 3 offers, and I think it's impossible to argue that this offer does not represent the best market value available today. And I think if you deliver it like that, most pragmatic commercial owners would see common sense. And with a buyer, it's not dissimilar. It's like, Rich, you've been looking for 3 months. You've missed out on 2 or 3 properties. I know this is a fraction more than what you want to pay, but frankly, it's ticking 8 out of the 10 boxes. It's never going to tick 10 out of 10. Even $20 million homes, people are making some compromise. I just think we should move forward with it. So. And I'm sure they're conversations you're having every day, with clients. So I really think the agent's got a lot to do with it, because as soon as you do hesitate when a buyer says, oh, I don't know, or a seller says, oh, maybe I should, take it off the market and put it back on in 3 months. Like that's nonsense, or, interest rates are going to come down, so therefore prices are going to, again, fiction, or I'll rent it, fiction, so you need to be able to challenge it, but not in a way where you're necessarily demolishing, their objection, but just talking through it in a constructive, pragmatic fashion.
Yeah, okay. For me, it's interesting. Be on the buying side as a buyer's agent, I can pick up a lot of cues, and I try to pick up as much to read between the lines as I can when I'm talking with the agent. And I can often gauge whether my offer is going to be successful simply by listening to the agent's voice tone. I know within 3 milliseconds, like if I presented you an offer, Adrian, on a property in Randwick, for example, I said, hey, here's an offer of 2.1 million, and I'm waiting on the phone call. Even if you say, as soon as you say, hi, Rich, I'm going to know whether I've actually got the offer or I haven't got the offer. It's just the way in which people talk. Because it's not the words you say, it's the tone. So that for me is something that's really critical. The other thing I look for is the speed of response. Like when I've put an offer, but and the vendor and the agent comes back to me, vendor's agent comes back to me quite quickly, with a counter offer, I go game on. But if it takes 4 days and there's really no movement, I'm thinking, their motivation's low. So I tend to find other options and move on quite quickly. So for me, my tactic as a buyer's agent for my clients is to have not all my eggs in one basket. I'm trying to find as many properties as possible to fit the bill or fit the brief of my client, so they can get it. But it's also to do with the timing of your offers and how confident you present your offers. Like for me, when I walk up to an agent, some people play this stupid game of treating agents like dirt, and I think it's terrible. Right? And you do some of this, right, where they treat you with disdain. But I say, hey, Adrian, or Mr. Agent, I'm really interested in this property, and I'll be giving you an offer tomorrow. Great. Follow through. Don't make false promises when you're negotiating, Yeah.
Totally. No, you're right about tonality, and words, because only 7% of communication is made up of words. The rest is body language and tonality. And
exactly.
My thing as an agent used to be, if someone made an offer and I was about to present it, I would always ask the one question and then shut up to the buyer. I'd say, I'm going to talk to the owner just so I know for my own benefit, is there any room in the offer at all?
Yeah.
And if they say absolutely, I'd know. If they said, oh, look, let me know, I knew straight away there was room,
Exactly.
So it's a really easy
question for you guys to ask. Very clever question. I'd like to ask a little bit more about how agents think in negotiation process. Like as an auctioneer and coach, what are the strategies do you see that agents use most often to get leverage in negotiations?
Look, as an auctioneer, it's very easy, especially when we got multiple competition, because if you're an experienced auctioneer, tonality alone, helps you, because I can be saying, okay, it's away from you, sir, and the bid's here, and that's like school, so I can really create urgency through tonality, and you see people literally jumping, when you scream out that first call.
Yeah.
As an agent, even if you've got one buyer auctions, which are very common, obviously, as you know and I know. Even though if you try and tell a seller that the day before the auction, they'll say, what the hell? How do you do an auction with one buyer? And that's why part of the Adrian Bo system, we talk about one buyer auctions at the listing, actually, to just manage that expectation. You got one house, you only need one buyer, right? But even with one buyer, it's very doable to create leverage and negotiation and leave nothing on the table, because effectively what you're doing is creating a private treaty environment, but it's with an unconditional sale. So that's why when buyers ask if I'm the auctioneer, it's like, well, why would I increase my offer? I'm like, well, why wouldn't you? You're here to buy it. But there's no one else, they say. And I say, well, look, just consider yourself in a private treaty negotiation. But the benefit is you're going to put your head on the pillow tonight knowing that you've actually secured it, and you're not doing it in a competitive environment. It's always, but you've got to be careful what you wish for, right? You've always wanted to buy something without competition. Here's your opportunity. You like the house. Yeah. You've only got to increase by 20,000 and you'll own it.
But your competitor in that situation is the vendor, right? Because you've got to meet the expectation. Yeah. That's it. So, we talked a bit before about EQ and good agents, but how do really great agents read the room differently compared to average ones? So what do the average agents do that aren't good at negotiating compared to the really good ones?
Look, that I call it the 5% club. The 5% club in Australia are not writing millions of dollars; they're earning millions and millions of dollars. For these guys, it's priority management around their set to sell process. So what I mean by that is they've all got a different process, but they're all extremely effective. So there's one particular agent who will list the property and have a sort of set to sell to conversation with the owner that the property will sell within 7 to 10 days, but he's got the actual buyers to back it up. He's got the track record. He's got everything, And then I know others that, another top agent, I won't mention names, but another top agent who, in Queensland that uses private treaty, because, in Queensland, obviously, with auctions, they got one hand tied behind their back a little bit, and he literally writes and earns millions and millions of dollars, and he uses ranges, and he's still got competitors at 1%, and he charges 3%, and then I've got another agent who runs everything all the way to auction, because that's his process, and he just knows that the owner needs to go on a journey in order to get to where they need to be, and buyers need to go on a journey. And despite the owner saying, "Look, I'm not a seller, definitely under not 1 cent under 1.2, it'll sell for 120, and they'll write them a 5-star review because they went on a journey and it was done professionally, and they had a very fortified process around feedback and communication. So, that's what I see, is the key.
I want to talk about misconceptions that buyers have about agents. In your view, what's the biggest misconception that buyers have about how agents operate during negotiations?
I think the biggest misconception and biggest mistake buyers make is when an agent says, "Look, I am negotiating with another party, so when I say best and final, I mean best and final, And look, I'm sure there's that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Look, I'm sure there's a very small percentage of agents who may be a bit untruthful and manufacturing that other buyer, but I would say, well over 90% don't. And then the property sells and the buyer's like, "Well, why didn't you tell me? I would have paid more." It's like, dude, I told you best and final meant best and final, So, I mean, we've all heard it, everyone wants to pay more after
and that's
it's sold.
The thing, isn't it? The misconception is that, people think real estate agents are always lying, and then when they they lose out, then they go, and it's like, well, that's the misconception. You nailed that one, mate. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about when agents use scripts. What's the fine line between being structured versus sounding manipulative? Do many agents do that sort of scripting process these days?
Oh, look, not my clients. It's pretty well known that I'm anti-scripts and dialogues, right? Yeah. Because our competition, Rich, is no longer, Ray White or Joe Hooker. Our competition is telemarketers, mate, right. And telemarketers ring us every day, all day, and ring our clients, all day, every day, and they're reading off a script. You can just hear it. So, I mean, if you're calling and reading off a script, man, you might as well just be put in the same genre as one of those, offshore Manila or Philippine-based, telemarketers. Yeah. So what I use but in saying that, you've got to have a structure, right? Yeah. So what I use is a list, what I call a list of objectives. Okay. Yeah. So I've got all these different lists of objectives depending on what type of call you're making, whether it's a cold call, an expired listing, a database call, a callback. We really
appreciate you tuning in to the Property Buyer Podcast, and I hope that you're finding our expert interviews helpful. So that we can keep providing this information and growing our audience, we rely on word-of-mouth recommendations. If you found this information useful, could I please ask you to share this podcast with your friends, family and colleagues, and ask them to subscribe to the Property Buyer Podcast. It would be a big help, and we'd be very grateful for your support. Thanks once again for sharing the links. And now, let's get back to the podcast. I'd like to ask you some questions around how buyers can best prepare for negotiations and particularly auctions. If you're advising a buyer directly, what's the first thing they should do to prepare mentally when they're going into a negotiation?
Well, one would definitely be to consider appointing a buyer's agent. I think that would be a great idea, especially if they've never done it before or if they're time poor. But look, without that luxury, I would say to speak to their bank or broker and at least find out what's the maximum that they could potentially go to. It doesn't mean they have to stretch to that, but I mean, I've been in many situations as an auctioneer where I've heard the buyer say to the agent, "Oh, you know what? If I knew, I actually would have prepared myself a little bit better. So I think that comes back to the agent where, sure, there might be a price guide, but once contracts are issued and once more intimate conversations take place, and what I advocate in my coaching is buyer meetings, face-to-face meetings leading into the auction, where you say, okay, I know we've been guiding X and there is competition. You know, if I was in your shoes and you really like the home, I'd be preparing myself, you know, for a little bit more, perhaps up to this amount. I'm not saying that's the expectation of the owner. I'm not saying that's where it's going to go to, but, you know, just to give yourself every opportunity to at least have that chance in the event you do want to stretch yourself and secure the property. So you know,
what you're saying advice to do is know their limits, basically, is what you're saying is the first thing.
Yeah. Because I just think that it can be, you know, a race to the bottom with buyers' budgets in terms of their minimum, where really they should be looking at what's their maximum and then have some wiggle room there.
Is there anything else mentally they could be doing, do you think, to prepare for, you know, a negotiation?
Definitely. I think they need to be looking at multiple properties, because, you know, if their kids have already picked a bedroom, it's very disheartening. I mean, you and I have both seen it. It's incredibly deflating. They're consumed by it for days, if not weeks. But look, they always end up finding something. But I think you have to be, as cliche as it sounds, you have to be pragmatic. You have to have a few properties in mind. And you've got to have realistic expectations around compromising. You know, like it's not going to, as I said previously, 8 out of 10 boxes is as good as it's going to get. Even if you've got a budget of 30 million, you know, it's probably going to be 8 out of 10 boxes. Yeah, so I think that's important.
Awesome. Okay. How much homework should the buyers do on comparable sales before going into negotiation, and how can they avoid anchoring themselves too high or too low? Because when you look at comparable sales, you can choose ones that you think are comparable. Actually, it's not comparable. But tell me about the homework that they need to do.
Yeah, it's a good point, because, I mean, there's a couple of points on that. Like, number one, when you and I first started, you know, this data just wasn't as available, accessible, or as transparent, right? And now it's available to almost everybody. Secondly, I don't like to use the word comparable. I like to use the word relevant sales, okay? Because if I'm looking at a $2 million property, I still think that a $2.8 million sale is relevant to me, because how much bigger was that? How much more superior was it? How much more accommodation did it have? What was the view? And relevant can also expand your geography as well. So, you know, if, you know, in the area I was very focused in, you know, was say that Coogee Randwick pocket, you know, if I was doing some comparable research as a buyer in Coogee, a relevant sale for me would also be Maroubra, you know, and for you, you know, I know you're sort of in that sort of Northern Beaches district, you know, something in the forest, you know, you could also be, you know, Davidson or Belrose or whatever. So I think relevant sales expands your geography and pricing, and I think it's important to definitely do your homework. But comparable is almost a misnomer, because are two properties really comparable?
Well, that's a good point. It's a really interesting point to tease that out a bit further. And the one thing that the listeners should know is that when a bank does a valuation on a property, which they always do, even if you've bought it at auction, they'll still do typically a valuation. But when they look at comparable sales, what their valuer does is assessing whether the sale is inferior, comparable, or superior. So there's there's the lower point, the midpoint, and the upper point. And there's often 7 or 8 things that the valuer is doing when they're commenting on that. And that's exactly what, Adrian, we do for our clients. When we're doing an appraisal for our clients, we take about 2 hours to put our reports together. So we don't press the button on CoreLogic and get an auto val like most people do. We actually prepare a more thorough approach to this whole process. And we have 10 different points that we look for. So we look at the land size, buys. We look at the construction material. We look at the layout, the aspect, the slope. There's all those different things that impact on value, and give the client a really good piece of homework so they go in fully armed, you know. I want to ask also, what role does confidence play in the buyer's approach? How can a buyer sort of, I guess, project confidence without being aggressive or arrogant, do you think?
This is a really a great question, because as an auctioneer, obviously I get calls all the time saying, Bowie, what are the tips? I'm going to bid at auction. And frankly, if I know them or remotely know them, and if I can be there, I'll be there for them and try and bid. But if I can't, the one thing I've learned as an auctioneer, and it's not just anecdotally once or twice, I'm talking hundreds of times, is that I've congratulated the buyer. And the buyer said to me, thank God, because honestly, I didn't have another cent. Yeah. And then I've gone to the underbidder and said, look, commiserations. Yeah. And that underbidder has said, you know what, that buyer was going to keep going. Like they just wanted it, you know. So honestly, it's I would say hundreds, if not thousands of times, right? Yeah. So the one thing, and the main piece of advice I give to buyers, regardless of what your budget is, bid quickly, bid confidently, bid loudly, okay? Because that does project confidence. It does project potentially a higher budget. And it's not trickery. It's just a tactic, and why not? Why not? You know, it's a transparent environment, and it's all about perception. If that other buyer perceives that you perhaps have a higher budget, well, then that's a competitive advantage for you. Why not?
It's a really good point, and that's why we as buyers agents offer an auction bidding service to give buyers that extra confidence. I love the auction game. It's a lot of fun. And Adrian, equally on the flip side of that, how should buyers handle silence in a negotiation? Like, particularly I'm talking silence, not at an auction, but in a private treaty situation, particularly when an agent might use it as a tactic.
Yeah, look, I'm not a huge fan of it if agents do that. I mean, it's a bit like, let's let them sweat on it overnight. I mean, that's a common terminology used. I mean, I don't think that's very professional. Especially now. I mean, maybe 20 years ago, Rich, but I mean, our competition is no longer other agents. Our competition are other industries like eBay, like Amazon, like Uber Eats, like Qantas. And you know what? Everything's quick. Everything's transparent. And speed is the new currency. Okay, so I think you'll lose deals if you carry on like that. Whether it's with the buyer or the seller, I mean, you're better off just getting back to them ASAP. And I mean, you know, we've heard it time again. Time kills deals, right? So I just don't think it's appropriate anymore. There may have been a time where it could have worked, but people are so time poor, and if it's not you, it's going to be someone else. And I think the hunger, the urgency, and the process-driven agent is the agent who wins, you know?
Yeah, cool. Have you got any memorable stories to share about maybe where you've seen a buyer win a negotiation, not because they paid the most, but because they just played it smarter?
Oh God! I mean, I've conducted, I think, over 6,000 auctions now. So, I mean, I've literally heard and seen it all. I think the bidding with confidence and bidding with high voice. But what seems to be a common one, and I know buyers agents are very good at doing it, is the first bid be a knockout bid. You know, I mean, it doesn't happen that often, but if anyone's usually will do it, it could be either a buyer's agent or quite an experienced buyer. Yeah. And frankly, I've put the hammer down many times, you know, on the first and only bid with 7 registered bidders. And
how many times did you do the going once, twice, thrice? Did you do that?
Stretched it out. Yeah, stretched it out. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I could probably only count, even though it's 6,000 auctions, I could probably gain a count on 1 or 2 hands that's actually happened. Yeah. But I think it's an outstanding tactic. I mean, and when you speak to that buyer, they say, you know what? that was my limit. That was my maximum.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care if the buyer was 50 grand less or not. That's my price. I just was one bid only. If I got it, I got it. If I didn't, I did. Yeah,
awesome.
Okay. And I was like, yeah, why not? Why not? You know?
What about in private treaty negotiations? On the flip side, what's one of the biggest mistakes that buyers make that cost them deals, you think?
Not presenting an unconditional offer. Yeah, I think email offers, SMS offers, verbal offers. Honestly, why waste your time? I mean, I've bought a lot of property myself personally.
Yeah.
I don't even talk to the agent, man. I just it's there. They got a price guide. I get my solicitor send me a 66W. I deliver it to the agent's office. Put a deadline on it. Not to intimidate anyone. It's just I just want to know by that time if it's a yes or a no, or if there's room to move, and just move on to the next one. But so I think, making verbal offers and assuming that it's going to get passed on appropriately. When I say appropriately, sometimes an agent may not even submit it, or maybe they won't even submit it with much conviction, because maybe the agent's not convinced it's genuine, But I mean, the minute they see that 66W on a signature and a check attached, let me tell you, things start to escalate.
It's real.
Yeah,
got it.
Yeah.
Adrian Bo, I've got two more questions to ask you. This one is, if you had to give buyers one golden rule of negotiation that applies in almost every situation, what do you think that golden rule should be?
Look, for buyers, whether it's auction or private treaty, in my opinion, the golden rule would be to have an objective limit before you walk into any negotiation, and be prepared to walk away if it's above that limit. So I think rather than allowing it to be a fluid process, because how long's a piece of string? And I think you have to walk into it, be it auction or private treaty, and say, okay, I've identified this property, I like it. I'm prepared to pay 5-7% over the guide, whatever it might be, but that's it. If I don't get it, it just means for me it wasn't meant to be, or whatever.
You mentioned fluid. The one thing that really infuriates me as a buyer's agent when I see that fluidity taking place before my eyes. I see couples standing in the auction room or standing outside ribbing each other. One partner looks into the other eye, starts batting her eyelids and going, let's do another 50, let's do another 100, and they've gone way over their limit, and they keep going. It's just, it just drives me nuts. It's like, come on, guys, you should have done your homework prior instead of making it up on the spot, So it's really good point. And finally, Adrian, what's the best piece of property investment advice or something you could share with our listeners today that you've received and like to share? Maybe, just the best piece of property or investment advice you've ever received.
For me, like anyone who's been in the industry a while, I've made mistakes and had good success buying and selling property. But frankly, I think buying and holding is the best strategy. I mean, I've tried everything, mate. I've tried buying, renovating, flipping. I've tried dabbled in a bit of development, tried everything. And let me tell you, the taxes and everything, it's just, mate, there's nothing. It's not worth it at the end of the day, unless it's on mass scale, right? Yeah. But buying and holding, and then if there is a liquidity moment that is required, great, it's there. But it needs to have a minimum 5 to 7 year projection in mind to see any sensible capital growth. To be honest, that's my first one. Second one would be if you can widen your geography and avoid strata and get into torrens, great. I think that the capital growth will be better, and autonomy is a little bit better in terms of just adding value. Don't get me wrong, if all you can afford is a strata and that's it, that I get it. But if you can go to a secondary suburb, for example, then get into some torrens title with a bit of land, again, that's another lesson for me, which I learned and adopted, in the sort of probably the second sort of trimester, I suppose, of my investing career.
Excellent, fantastic piece of advice. Well, look, Adrian Bo, let's wrap it up there. I just want to say a particular thank you for sharing your knowledge, your experience, and a couple of stories, and particularly some of those great nuggets. I'm sure our listeners will get some good value out of it. So, thank you again.
Absolute pleasure, and God bless everyone.
Thanks for being with us on another Property Buyer podcast. If you have a question you'd like to ask, please click on the SpeakPipe link and we'll answer this during the next episode. If you're looking to buy a residential or commercial property in the near future and would like to get the added advantage of having a buyer's advocate on your side, then please reach out to my team today and send us your inquiry, and we'd be delighted to help. Please visit our website at propertybuyer.com.au, where you can stay updated with all my latest market updates, weekly blogs and live suburb profiles to help you make better property decisions. We look forward to connecting with you again on the next Property Buyer podcast.